Hi guys, it's Sheena from Teton Raptor Center and I'm here to give you this week's patient update. Unfortunately, this week we just don't have enough time to cover every single one of our birds, but we are going to highlight some of our most recent admissions as well as some of our interesting cases. So let's go ahead and get started. First up, I want to highlight one of our most recent releases. Here we have Golden Eagle 829 going back to the wild out in Saddle String, Wyoming. This was the bird that initially came in and was flown on a small aircraft since he was about over a 6-hour drive away from TRC. He got a ride back and here he is out in the wild. First up for our current patients this week is Cooper's Hawk 925B. This bird came in from Jackson, Wyoming and was found on the ground unable to fly. X-rays showed that he actually broke his scapula on the left side of his shoulder. So he's going to remain in the ICU for about 4 weeks until that scapula is healed, and then he'll begin flight conditioning and we'll make sure that he is hunting and flying perfectly before he gets released. Next up is actually another Cooper's Hawk. This is 925A, and this bird came in after it had flown into a window, and it's dealing with some left eye trauma as well as some spinal trauma. Spinal trauma is really tricky because there's not a whole lot you can do. We are doing cold laser therapy on her spine every day. And we're going to try a treatment for 2 weeks and see if that works. But right now, because of the spinal trauma, she's having a hard time standing up. You can see that in these last two photos, as well as with the other Cooper's Hawk, that we actually have a protective cover over their tails. And that is called a tail guard. It basically just helps keep their feathers nice and clean and shiny and fresh while they're recovering in the ICU, since this species has a really long tail. Next up for the birds we're covering this week is Swainson's Hawk 914, and this is actually our first adult Swainson's Hawk that we've admitted in a long time. The bird was initially hit by a vehicle, but is doing really well right now. She moved out of the ICU and is in the PCU in a much larger space where she can fly around. And then actually within a week's time, she'll have moved out into our big flight barn where she'll be practicing her flight conditioning and live prey testing. Next up is tiny little Northern Saw-Whet Owl 9.5. This bird came in with a small coracoid fracture in his left shoulder, and in a couple weeks we'll be able to move him out of the ICU and into a larger enclosure where he can start to flight condition. Here we have Red-tailed Hawk 831, and we got this bird out, took new x-rays, and it looks like the ulna fracture that was in the left wing has fully healed. So here we are removing the wrap that is protecting that wing from being able to open and close so that it can heal in perfect alignment. Now that it has fully healed though, she doesn't need it anymore. So we're completely taking it off. And once this wing wrap comes off, the bird should be able to outstretch its wing as much or as little as it wants to, but it will get physical therapy regularly to help move things along. Next up this week is Swainson's Hawk 821, and this bird came in initially with a femur fracture in its left leg. We have 2 metal pins in the bird's leg, and those pins help align it during the healing process. However, things have been looking really good, and it was time for the hardware to come out. So this is just a short video of us working on removing that hardware that's in there. There are actually 2 pins. One is the external fixator, which is this one that you can see zoomed in on, and we're using clippers to remove the external piece of hardware, and then that piece will end up just getting pulled right out. And then we'll do the same thing with the second piece. So you can see it on this side of the bird's knee. It's going to get pulled out very carefully so that we don't pull on any feathers as well. And then once that piece comes out, we'll be able to work on the second pin. These two have to be done in conjunction. So you have to work on the external fixator first before pulling the IM pin. And don't worry, this bird is fully sedated under anesthesia, so it doesn't feel any of this poking and prodding. There is the external fixator out. And then here comes the IM pin. So that is this big wad of tape that's just going to get gently pulled on to make sure there's no feathers in the way, and this should slide out very easily. And that was the pin keeping the femur aligned. Next up is our ferruginous hawk 8-2. This is the bird that came in with really severe right eye trauma. We ended up having to completely eviscerate the eye, and we do plan on using this bird for education. Here he is swallowing a whole rat. We are making sure humans go in there and feed him so that he can associate humans with a positive connection and build that during his training sessions so that one day when he becomes an avian ambassador, he's super comfortable around humans. You can see here he's just picking at any last scraps that are down by his feet and by his mat, and he doesn't seem concerned at all that there's a human right in front of him, so this is really good. Next up is long-eared owl 8-1, and he is flight conditioning, working on these vertical jumps from the ground up to his high perches. Last but not least is northern harrier 730. This is the bird that came in July with eye trauma and severe head trauma, but has since moved out to the flight barn and is flying really beautifully. Here she is flight conditioning, and we actually are going to be releasing her today on Friday back out into Evanston, Wyoming. Here are just her last couple of flights out in the flight barn before her release. All right, that's all we've got for this week. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed learning more about our birds. Remember that if you want to do your part to help keep wild birds wild, you can check out our website at tetonraptorcenter.org and make a donation. You can also click the description below and you can donate right there. Bye!